But what they loved about Sid was he was in the room every day with them. He was in the trenches working, and he would sort of sit in a big chair, and they would throw out ideas, and he would go, but he would signal if it was positive or negative. He would shoot. He would literally shoot, make sounds of a machine gun, and shoot them down if he didn't like them. But they adored him because he would try anything. Neil had worked for Jackie Gleason, who he hated working for because he would literally get scripts sent back to him, sketches, and it would be slipped under the door with just a lot of red marks written through them. But Sid was there and would play with them and try anything they wanted, and they were doing for the time sophisticated things, parodies of foreign films, and so it was a really golden memory for him. I mean, that was working with all those, being in the room with all those incredible comic minds, and then at the center of it was this genius, this troubled genius. But it was something that he was very moved by, the going back to that time and remembering. And I remember Sid coming to see the show and how, and I acknowledged him at the opening night, and seeing Neil around him, he was it was like a kid again. He would just giggle at everything Sid said, and he was I think Sid was very touched by the play.
Mm-hmm. Well, following that, your next Broadway show was Love, Valor, Compassion, which you first had done off-Broadway, then in '95 did
right.
On Broadway. Who was Buzz Hauser, your character? What was he
like? Well, that's another. It's like Laughter on the 23rd Floor. I had initially done a reading for Terence where I played the two twins, John and James. And he said to me, he had written this part of Buzz for somebody else. And I wasn't going to be a part of it. I was just helping out, doing a reading. And then I don't know, time went by, and there was a reading that Jerry Zaks for a moment was going to direct it, and he put together a reading, and I went to see the reading, and I was sitting in the audience, and we're waiting like 20 minutes, and there's like 100 people there waiting for this reading, and then Jerry and Terence come up, and they say, the guy who's playing the part he's in traffic. So he said, would you read it? And I said, well, okay. He said, we can't keep these people waiting anymore. So I sat down and we read the play, and I was killing. It's a great part. And I was, they were laughing and laughing. We had a blast. So then, but Jerry was sort of on the fence about doing the play, and I said, well, what if I said I would do the play? Would you feel better? And he said yes, and then he still didn't do the play, but I was committed to it. And then they found Joe Mantello, and that was what the doctor ordered. He was the right guy, and it was the right play, and so Laughter on the 23rd Floor closed earlier than expected, and then that's how it all worked out, and I got to play that wonderful character.
A funny thing happened on the way to the Forum.
Yes.
It was one of several cases, it seems.
Oh, where God, I'm old. I'm so old.
Well, it seems that you got a chance. Shows that you had done, you were talking about your non-equity experience. Some of these shows that you had done
right
early on.
Oh, sure.
You had played
I had played
Pseudolus before.
And I had played Hysterium, too, yeah.
So going into it, in a new production, obviously, with a number of people you'd worked with before. Of course, Jerry Zaks.
Right.
You've mentioned Louis Stadlin, who you seem to have worked with a number of times.
Oh, yes. The great Louis Stadlin.
Coming into that show, what was the experience of creating Funny Thing Happened on the Forum anew for another generation?
That was one where I remember Louis said he was originally going to play Lycus. And then he kept saying, oh, I don't know, Lycus is, and then he wanted to play the other part, the the old guy, Senex. And so I said to Jerry, well, maybe if Louis played Senex, then Ernie Sabella could play Lycus. So it was really like old home week. And, it was just, we just had it's a great piece of material. It's like Guys and Dolls. You can only screw it up. It's wonderful material and by brilliant writers, and it was like a dream to get to do that. I had gone to see when I was in high school. I had gone to see Phil Silvers, the revival with Phil Silvers, which I loved. They did not do good business, even though he had won a Tony, Larry Blyden. I thought it was a wonderful production myself, but people weren't going, and they did this as a publicity stunt. They'd never do this today. They had a free 4th of July matinee, and I stood online in the blazing sun, and I was the last person let into the theater. And then they closed the doors because it was a huge line that went blocks. And I stood in the back of that theater and I watched Phil Silvers, and watched him. It was written with him in mind, and then he didn't want to do it. Thought, I've been doing this for years, and then was Milton Berle, and then finally they wound up with The Grade Zero. But but to see him do it was extraordinary, and especially because the audience was so great, and he. I just remember the ovation when he came on was so enormous and went on for so long. And he did the very sort of vaudevillian thing of he looked at him, that he didn't have a watch. He sort of looked at his watch like it was going on too long. And, sort of ad-libbing a little bit with the courtesans and the young man playing Hero came in with a line. And he said, Wait a minute, I'm working here. And then he continued to do this thing with the girls' tassels, and it was just heaven. It was just perfect. And so many years later to be playing that part and a new production was thrilling beyond belief.
Well, you mentioned Phil Silvers, who starred in Do Re Mi in the early 60s, and I guess it was the mid-90s here in New York City Center, part of the Encore series. You were cast in Do Re Mi.
Yes.
What kind of an experience was that for you, doing the show that Silvers had done?
I loved that. I loved that show so much. I loved working with Randy Graff, and really... This is how old I am. This is Heather Headley. She was making her. People were just discovering her, and she was in it. And Brian Stokes Mitchell, and we had a tremendous time. It's a fun score, and it was and really the recording of that is one of my favorites that I've ever done. Especially the sort of that. Kind of specialty number, the Late Late Show, which it's like he's doing his club act. He does impressions, and it was just wonderful.
What was the Encore's experience like? You're basically involved for 2 weeks, about 10 or 11 days of rehearsal.
Yeah, well, this was sort of going back to the the roots of it, where you took a show that was sort of not that successful, but written by great writers and it was interesting to take another look at it, and the book it was always referred to as a kind of poor man's Guys and Dolls, but it was a real vehicle for Phil Silvers and Nancy Walker, who had I believe, did he win a Tony for that?
I think so.
Yeah. And and I think it certainly had a run because of them. But it was not considered one of the great classic shows. But it's because the premise of the whole thing about the jukebox industry. But there's some great numbers in it. It's legitimate. It's really a lot of fun. And Paul Gemignani, conducted and musical directed, and he's the best. So
well, one show that will be a classic, with the passage of time, will be The Producers. And you as Max Bialystock.
You think so?
I think it already is, but with the passage of time, it certainly will be.
With the passage of time.
As we all
time heals everything, eh?
I've heard that song somewhere. Max Bialystock.
Yeah.
Now, here you are coming into a role that people knew through the movie, the 1968 movie,
right.
The Mel Brooks movie.
Yes.
Now you're putting the show on stage. How did you see Max as a person, as a character?
Well, you can only see Zero Mostel. I mean,
Did you see Zero Mostel, or did you see the character Max?
Well, the character is Zero. I mean, it's kind of he wrote it for Zero. I mean, I don't think he would have made the movie without Zero. So they're kind of you can't take one away from the other. There's a part of it. It is Zero in a sense. I mean, when you visualize it, but And I can remember falling in love with the movie as a kid, and I remember seeing it. I saw it in a revival house in L.A., and people